Biblical Covenants Part 3, The Everlasting Covenant. If you haven't watched Part 1 and 2, I do recommend going back first. Please see the link in the description for all the scriptures used, including the ones that were not read aloud in the video. Questions we will explore. What is the covenant made with Abraham? What is the covenant of circumcision? Are these covenants conditional? What are their terms, if so? How are they related to the covenant given to his people at Mt Sinai? How are they related to the new covenant? Are all these covenants the same thing? The Abrahamic covenant. The covenant cut with Abraham is a bit different from the other covenants. The everlasting covenant Yahuwah will establish with Abraham's seed to come, the original covenant given to the people at Mount Sinai, and the new covenant cut with Messiah's blood. However, all four of these covenants are connected in an amazing way. Let's take a deep look at them. If you're not familiar with these covenants, please stop or return to study the verses below. And he believed in Yahuwah, and he reckoned it to him for righteousness. Genesis 15:6. Abraham had faith. You may want to read Genesis 15, 17, and 26 before or after this presentation. Here's what we see first in Genesis 15. Below it appears the covenant is only a promise of blessings from Yahuwah to Abraham alone. A promise of what he would do for Abraham and his offspring. So Yahuwah made a covenant of promise, an oath to Abraham, that he would give the land to him and his descendants, which appears to be unconditional, just a promise. On the same day Yahuwah made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your seed, from the river of Mitzrayim to the great river, the river Euphrates. Genesis 15:18. A key. Before the promise was given to Abraham, Abraham had faith and belief, as we see above in Genesis 15:6. I infer that Abraham's faith caused him to obey Yahuwah and walk in his ways, although Abraham was only justified by his faith. See footnote number 3, inferences at the end. If you don't know what to infer means, please make sure you watch this footnote at the very end. In Genesis 26 below, we learn the reason Abraham received the unconditional promise. Because Abraham had obeyed, he received blessings. Abraham didn't need a covenant with incentives to do what his father said, as he was already walking with Yahuwah as a son with faith and trust in the things his father said. See Biblical Covenants Part 1. I infer that Abraham's faith caused him to obey Yahuwah, which in turn earned him a covenant of promises. When we have faith, we do the things our Father says. And we can see those verses here. This is Yahuwah speaking to Isaac about how he established his covenant with Abraham and why. And if you look at the last sentence, it says, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and guarded my charge, my commands, my laws, and my Torah. And Torah is plural. It can be singular or plural. It means a law or all of the laws. So Abraham was already walking in the Torah by his faith or through his faith in Yahuwah. A biblical covenant is a cause and effect agreement. As Abraham's faith caused the effect, the promise, we can still see cause and effect in regards to this oath, although not within it. It's an unconditional contract. Abraham's faith counted as righteousness, causing the Most High to make a covenant of promise with him. The covenant made with Abraham didn't need terms, as Abraham walked in faith. I don't think Abraham needed to be held to the law. What I'm saying is that I don't think he obeyed the law because he was held to it, nor did he obey the law in order to get something from the Father, other than the Father's approval, as he trusted in him and feared him, healthy fear, as a good son does with a good father. Abraham had faith, and I'd say he had a circumcised heart. If you have a child who does everything you say, having complete trust and faith in you as the parent, is there a reason to create a conditional contract with rules and conditions for the child? The answer is no. Just as we saw in Biblical Covenants Part 1, conditional contracts are for those who need them. Just like the example of a school teacher creating a behavior contract for a difficult student. The difficult student needs to be held to the rules, with incentives to do them, the conditions, which are rewards and consequences. A covenant can also prevent future problems. Abraham had faith and didn't need to be held to the law. He obeyed Father in everything he said due to his faith. When Yahuwah tested to see if he would sacrifice Isaac, he showed he would. You see, Abraham was already doing the Father's instructions due to his faith. That is faith. Even demons believe. James 2:19 also teaches us the true definition of faith. Demons know who Yahuwah is, but they don't care what he says. True faith causes one to walk out their discipleship doing what the Father says. The Torah. Let's pause to look at the law before we move on. What is the law? Many will say it's the first 5 books, but this is not accurate. The Torah is in the first 5 books, but the Torah isn't the first 5 books. Words matter. Torah, instruction from Yahuwah, can be found in almost every book of Scripture, if not all. The Torah is just Yahuwah's instructions, his teaching. It's one thing and all the things the Father tells his sons to do. He may tell his sons a few things one week and a few things the week later. The Torah is Yahuwah's words. All that you say we will do. When agreeing to do the covenant terms, I infer that one is agreeing to do whatever Yahuwah says, putting all faith in his words. Torah, H8451, is one law, and Torah is all the laws. The first time the word Torah is used is in Genesis 26:5. Note, this is before Moses was born, and we already read this verse, so we'll keep going. Laws is Hebrew word H8451, Torah, which comes from H3384, meaning to instruct, to teach. Torah includes his 10 commandments, his decisions and laws, instructions, and teachings. And Yahuwah said to Moses, See, I am raining bread from the heavens for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, in order to try them whether they walk in my Torah or not. Exodus 16:4. Above, Yahuwah tested them to see if they would listen to the things he said. Notice the Torah is Yahuwah's instruction, not Moses' Torah, although sometimes it's referred to as Moses' Torah, as Moses acted in the authority of Yahuwah. It's like a waiter saying, I'm out of my meatloaf. It's not his food, but the owner's food. However, the waiter represents the owner. Also, the Torah, as we see, was given to Abraham way before Moses was born, because Torah is the instructions of Yahuwah, all the words he speaks. Even Adam was given instruction, Torah, from Yahuwah, being told not to eat from the tree of good and evil. Take a look at the word law throughout Scripture, and notice there's another word for law, H1882, which can have a generic usage. In other words, it can be used when a king creates a law. But H8451, Torah, is used exclusively for Yahuwah's instruction. Notice below that they are to agree to do all that is right and good in the sight of Yahuwah. Torah. Ye shall diligently keep the commands of Yahuwah and his testimonies and his statutes, which he hath commanded thee. And thou shalt do that which is right and good in the sight of Yahuwah, that it may be well with thee, and that thou may goest in and possess the good land, which Yahuwah sware unto thy fathers. Deuteronomy 6:17-18. And Yahuwah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yahuwah our God, for our good always, that he might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuwah our God, as he hath commanded us. Deuteronomy 6:24-25. One might say that wanting to do what Yahuwah says is loving him with all thy heart. The everlasting covenant. Please pause and read this for yourself from Genesis 17:2-14. Looking at these verses, we see Yahuwah will establish his covenant with Abraham and with his seed after him. It's an everlasting covenant which gives the blessing of land as an everlasting possession, an eternal inheritance. The blessings also include Yahuwah being their Elohim. They will be his. These are the same blessings of the covenant at Mount Sinai and the same blessings we see in the new covenant. And I shall establish my covenant between me and you and your seed after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and your seed after you. And I shall give to you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan as an everlasting possession. Genesis 17:7-8. We see there's instruction given in chapter 17. Every male is to be circumcised. The Most High calls it a sign of his covenant, and it's an instruction. Something needs to happen in order to get the blessings, cause and effect. How do we know that's true? If we keep reading, we see that if a child is not circumcised, then that child has broken the covenant and is cast out. You can't break an unconditional covenant. However, although there are terms for all who walk in it, circumcision, Yahuwah has still promised Abraham that he will do this for him because he obeyed him. And an uncircumcised male child, who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, his life shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Genesis 17:14. Having your life cut off from the people for breaking the covenant is the opposite of a blessing. I'd call it a curse. So we do see terms and conditions, blessings and curses in the everlasting covenant, although the terms are simply circumcision, which is also a sign. Circumcision. Why is circumcision required in the everlasting covenant? Was Yahuwah telling us that his people must have a circumcised heart? Is a circumcised heart a sign that you are his? In Deuteronomy 30:1-10, Yahuwah is telling his people what he will do when Messiah regathers the 12 tribes. I infer this will take place just before the millennial reign of Messiah. Interestingly, Yahuwah will circumcise their hearts at that time if they turn back to him, and we know that circumcision is a sign of the everlasting covenant and a condition for the children born into the covenant. We have a connection. Let's look. Here are the verses from Deuteronomy 30:5-10. Please pause to read them on your own, but do notice the underlined words. Elohim shall circumcise your heart and the heart of your seed. So it does look like there's a heart circumcision at the regathering. Please note, I'm not saying physical circumcision is a requirement, and I'm not saying it's just heart circumcision. I am allowing Scripture to teach us, and I'm staying away from stating my beliefs, releasing everything I once thought I knew, and trying to allow Father to reveal through His Word. We will get to circumcision when it's time. The original Mt Sinai covenant. Let's return to something said in Biblical Covenants Part 1. We saw how teachers give behavior contracts to unruly students who need to be held to the classroom rules with incentives to obey, rewards, and consequences to help the child. I think this is a wonderful parallel to what we see in the covenant at Mt Sinai. The Most High tested the people in the desert wilderness to see if they would obey, to see if they had faith. They failed the tests again and again, and many never made it into the promised land. Just before going into the land, those left all got circumcised according to the everlasting covenant, the sign of covenant, and they also received the covenant that held them to the Torah. Note, this covenant was also described as everlasting. More terms were added to this covenant cut at Mount Sinai. I infer that while in the desert wilderness, they had demonstrated that they needed them listed out. They were held to the Torah through the contract with blessings and curses. Key, Yahuwah was holding them to His law with more conditions to help them do the terms that were always there. I infer they were held to the same Torah that Abraham obeyed through faith. They were also given tools to help them remember. For instance, hanging the commands on their doorstep posts and wearing blue tzitzit were commands to help them remember to do the terms. A teacher does the same thing when students need help remembering the rules. For example, a teacher may create a word riddle to help students remember the rules for using the bathroom. They needed help to obey Him, which was needed in order for Yahuwah to accept them as His people and be their Elohim. It was needed to get them into the land, to keep His promise to Abraham. And of course they failed, and the promise is still to come. Are you starting to see it? The everlasting covenant is a covenant of circumcision and connected to a circumcision of the heart. We can infer it is the reason for the covenant given at Mount Sinai, and it is the reason the new covenant was cut with Messiah's blood. They are different covenants, but they are also the same thing. All are agreements with Yahuwah that enable His promise to be delivered. Yahuwah said He would establish His everlasting covenant with Abraham's seed to come. All these contracts are to help get the people to walk in His ways, so He can deliver the promise. He always keeps His word. He does not change. He is black and white. When He says something, He does it. Just like the example of a good father seen in part 1. For Israel and the stranger to be His children, and for Him to be their Elohim, and to receive the eternal inheritance promised, I think He wants them to have 100% faith in Him and wants them to have circumcised hearts, walking in the Spirit. Summary. The Most High makes an oath, a covenant of blessings with Abraham because he obeyed, which I infer was due to Abraham's faith, causing him to do the things his father said. We learn Yahuwah will establish His everlasting covenant with Abraham and with his seed after him. Key. Are we being told this is the covenant at Mount Sinai and that this is the new covenant too? Abraham had to circumcise the flesh of his foreskin as a sign of the covenant at 99 years old, and males would need to be circumcised to be in covenant, the terms. Note, this is only a command for those in covenant. Hold that thought. Also, when the regathering takes place, their hearts are circumcised. Those not circumcised would be seen as breaking the covenant and would be cursed. Yahuwah promised Abraham that he would deliver these blessings. Bottom line, the covenant with Abraham alone was unconditional. The blessings will be delivered. A key, the promise to Abraham alone was unconditional. Yahuwah must follow through, bringing at least some of his seed into the promised land as an eternal inheritance. However, for Abraham's seed, it appears to be conditional. Circumcision is required. We know that receiving the eternal inheritance is conditional, as some were not allowed into the land after leaving Egypt. Also, the author of Hebrews warns followers that the same thing can happen to them. An eternal inheritance is not resurrection. An eternal inheritance is not immortality. An eternal inheritance is ownership for infinity. When these words are used, the context may or may not be related to living forever. It's not what the words mean. Abraham's seed will receive an eternal inheritance, meaning Israel, as a people, will never leave the land. That doesn't mean every single person will live forever, but as a people, they will continue forever. We may or may not learn later that they also live forever. But if you insert that inference into these verses as fact, and your inference is wrong, you will never know the truth. Don't read beliefs into Scripture. Be intentional when you make logical conclusions so you can correct them if you're wrong. Separate inferences from facts on the page. Free your mind and see what Scripture teaches you, removing the scales. Please see how important this is. When you add connections that aren't there, you are adding to the Scripture. It blinds you as a reader. People do it all the time. Pastors do it. Scholars do it. I've done it. I'm trying to stop doing it and come at Scripture like a little child, which allows Yahuwah to reveal. If you only want to know truth and are ready to release the pride that's keeping you yoked to what you think you know, then try to notice when you're adding beliefs to the things you read, and notice when others do it so they don't indoctrinate you. Be patient. It takes time. Here's how I now see the covenants of promise. You might push pause to study the chart. Notice that the original covenant at Mt Sinai and the new covenant at the bottom are all under the umbrella of the everlasting covenant. Also, notice the terms of the new covenant are the same as the original covenant, which is showing us that those terms were never bad. Yahuwah is giving the same terms again. And here's another way to look at it. Pause to look at the chart. The new covenant. As many may need this now, let's look at the new covenant for just a second, but I will explore it later. The terms of the new covenant are the same, the instructions of Yahuwah, but the terms are delivered directly into the hearts and minds of the people so they do them, not just told to them orally or written down. The difference is in how the terms of the covenant are delivered. The new covenant has the same blessings, but by default, no curses are needed. I infer that with the instructions put directly on their hearts and minds, they will not be able to break the covenant terms. Hence, no curses are needed. We will explore the new covenant later in this series. And I shall give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you, and I shall take the heart of stone out of your flesh, and I shall give you a heart of flesh, and put my spirit within you, and I shall cause you to walk in my laws, and guard my right rulings, and shall do them. Ezekiel 36, 26 through 27. Please pause to look at this chart. If you need a scripture reference or have an edit to suggest, please leave a comment below. Thank you. What is everlasting? Before we move on, let's look at the word everlasting. The word is everlasting. The Torah is everlasting. Both the word and the Torah have been there since the very beginning. Adam and Eve were given instructions from the Father, Torah. They failed to have faith in Father and did things their own way instead of exactly as the Father said. They allowed their hearts to define the command. Faith was always needed to be His. And you can pause to read these verses. The covenant is also everlasting. But remember, a covenant is an agreement to do something. For Father, it was originally an agreement to give blessings to Abraham, who had 100% faith in him and was already doing his law due to his faith. Abraham passed the test of faith, which I infer was the reason for the promise. For all others, the covenant was an agreement to do all that He says. The terms, in order for Yahuwah to deliver His original covenant promise given to Abraham. The everlasting covenant is everlasting because the promise is an eternal inheritance. A key. The covenant is everlasting, and its purpose is to obey the everlasting word and do the everlasting Torah. Most importantly, and not to be missed, it's all about the word, the Torah, not the covenant. The covenant is related and important, yes, but in my opinion, you miss the point of the covenants if you miss this. Back to paradise. The everlasting covenant was and is a means to the end. I think it's the way Yahuwah ensures He keeps His word. It's a vehicle to get His people back to paradise. Messiah is the door, and His instructions are the way. See the first and the last video. Yahushua said to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 14:6. And you can pause to look at the chart. Yahuwah wants His children to walk with Him, with faith in Him, which is His word, which is His instructions. So where are we now? Are we to be in covenant? When does the new covenant begin? Or are we already in it? How is the new covenant the same, and how is it different? How do these things we learn today apply to a believer's life? Stay tuned for part 4. If you enjoyed this, please like the video and subscribe. And I would really appreciate hearing from you in the comments below. I recommend going back and rewatching the video and maybe revisiting part 1 and part 2. Look up the scriptures for yourself. Pray for clarity and allow time. Some of you might want to refer to the letters of Paul, and I would recommend putting those aside for now. They were written to specific audiences, and we must not put those letters above the words of the Father and His Son. If we approach this like a little child and release what we thought we knew, waiting until we are sure we have a thorough understanding of the covenants, the Torah, the words of the Father, and the words of His Son, then we can start to look at the letters of Paul, and I think the messages are going to start jumping off the pages. Let's see. May Yahuwah guide our paths. Prayer. We are responsible for our own walk, and although we can learn with and from others, we shouldn't blindly trust others with our lives. We know Satan has deceived the whole world, so it doesn't matter what's popular or what the scholars say. What matters is His truth. I pray you will consider pausing at this time to pray on this presentation. I pray you will ask the Most High God to give you discernment and show you the truth, soften the heart in submission to what is good and true, while releasing all that is not. All praise and credit to Yahuwah for His truth in these end times. May Yahuwah be with you and bless you. Hallelujah. Footnote number 1, Anointed One. Christ is an English translation for the Greek word G5547, Christos, meaning Anointed One. It's a title, not a name. The Hebrew equivalent is Mashiach, H4899, or Messiah in English. When spoken in Hebrew, Greek, or English, it is the same thing. I have used the Hebrew version, as you have seen in this presentation. Footnote number 2, inferences. Inference, the act or process of deriving logical conclusions from premises known or assumed to be true. It's a good habit to show distinction between the things we infer and the things that are black and white in Scripture, so we aren't perpetuating the errors of so many believers in the world today. If the Scriptures don't directly tell us, then our logical conclusions are simply inferences based on the Scriptures and not necessarily facts. In this presentation, I did my best to differentiate between my inferences and what I see as fact, so I am not adding to or taking away from His Word. Other ways to say I infer, it seems, I think, from what I read, I conclude, based on Scripture,